Our intro music is provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
And shout out to all the truckers out there tonight. So I hope everybody's having a great day. This is Gary. You're listening to Night Dreams. Boy, I am coming down with laryngitis. I'm losing my voice. I don't know what it is. Well, maybe I do. Maybe I'm getting sick or something. I have no idea. Hey, Kevin, are you out there tonight too?
Yes, I'm out there, but hey, you shouldn't really diagnose yourself because you can end up like one of those people that, look at the TV and like, oh no, I got that disease.
Well, what's wrong with that? I mean, like leprosy or something like that. That would be kind of interesting.
I don't know about that, man.
But how you feeling? You were saying you were getting sick the other day.
I was. The other day I was feeling really, really, really warm inside, and I was very, dizzy,
Warm inside. I usually get sick and I'm warm on the outside, so I don't know. Hey, the news today, really on the fake news, the only thing I found that was interesting, they are now accusing Trump of creating a trade war.
Oh, yeah? What's wrong with that?
Well, I guess with all the tariffs he's putting on all the products coming in the country, and now a lot of people like Harley are starting to suffer because when it comes into their country, they're slapping all kinds of extra fees on it, and it's raising the prices, which is now killing the sales of motorcycles over in Europe.
Well, I guess it sucks to be a bigger company then.
Oh, what can I say? So anyway, here it is. Friday. The week is pretty much all gone. Just the weekend. And what can I say? At least it isn't snowing. It isn't freezing over here in Gig Harbor, Washington. What can I say? It's going to be a great day. So I'm going to bring our guest on right now. And let's see if he's there. Are you there? I hope you're there.
I'm here.
Hey, who do we have out here as our guest tonight? Why don't you tell everybody who you are, and then we can get into interesting topic.
My name is John Graden. I'm known particularly as a martial artist. In fact, I've been training in martial arts since 1974, and I've enjoyed some success in that regard. I'm also the author of nearly a dozen books, including The Imposter Syndrome, which is probably the most well-known book. The imposter syndrome is the feeling that you're not as smart, talented, or skilled as everyone around you thinks you are, and that you're about to be found out. It's very prevalent in successful women.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah, it's really, and when I describe it to audiences, I can just see the women's faces, holy cow, you're talking about me. So it really hits home. And the books we're talking about tonight are also my best-selling books. The Imposter Syndrome and these two books are the bestsellers I have because the topics are just so fascinating. And the ones we're talking about tonight are near-death experiences. And it's a fascinating subject on many different levels. My mom told me when I was a young teenager, she told me that she was in the hospital being operated on, and she said she could feel herself separate from her body, float above the surgeons working on her, and listen to what they were saying. And I don't know if she ever got that corroborated or not, but that's a very common experience in a near-death experience. And even the name near-death experience is a little, I'm not quite sure if that's the right description for it, but we'll explore that. So my mom, when she told me about this, planted this interest in it, but I didn't pursue it until I started to study hypnosis in 2006. I got really deep into hypnosis, particularly regressive hypnosis, which is absolutely fascinating. And there are similarities to the near-death experience as they are in there are similar experiences to regressive hypnosis. There is the sense of almost a multiple lives, reincarnation. And to be clear, I am writing about the experiences of people that tell these stories in the media. So I will gather 4 or 5 interviews with somebody, watch what they say on the interview, and then put together a profile from that. So it's their words, not mine. It's their near-death experience and not mine. But it was really cemented. One day I was listening to the Dennis Prager show, which I enjoyed very much. And his guest was Dr. Sam Parnia. And he is the he's head of research at the University of New York in Stony Brook. And the subject was near-death experiences because he came from a completely scientific approach to near-death experiences. He's had it's called the AWARE study, and AWARE stands for Awareness During Resuscitation, which studied over 2,000 patients that had cardiac arrest. And then coming out of that cardiac arrest, they were interviewed, and approximately 18% described some of the traits, or all of the traits, or numerous traits of a near-death experience. And I thought that was really interesting. He thinks, Dr. Parnia, and it's shared by a lot of scholars that study the subject, that everyone has a near-death experience, but it's like a dream. You don't remember every dream that you have. So I thought that was interesting. And then he said that one of the traits of near-death experience is that they're really experiential. They're glorious, wonderful, best experience ever. He says, with the exception of suicides, they have a completely different experience, and it's much darker. That one little line was the inspiration for me to write the book on near-death experiences of suicide survivors. But the first book that I wrote was near-death experiences of doctors and scientists. Who better to study than people of science, particularly, and this is prevalent in the scientific world, is a questioning of God, questioning of Jesus, and an atheist or agnostic attitude. And I profiled 10 different doctors and scientists that had near-death experiences. Every single one of them moved to a more spiritual lifestyle, and in most cases, they became strong believers in God and Jesus, and a few of them actually became pastors. They actually found their own church. One guy was murdered in Russia. He was raised in a very atheist environment. He thought people who believed in Jesus were idiots until he was murdered. He got run over by a car by some thugs, and he actually woke up kind of in one of those or came to or emerged from the experience, I guess you could say, on the cold slab.
Oh, wow.
And his NDE was a lot of interaction with Jesus, and some of the many parts of the NDE we'll explore. It changed him completely. He opened up a church in Texas, and for the next 30 years, he did his best to bring people to Jesus. So I find that absolutely fascinating. So that is a long-winded introduction to your guest tonight.
Oh, wow. But
you forgot I was doing that night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy.
You're looking at your watch, you're thinking, okay.
No. Longer the better. Longer the better. I had a friend one time tell me that he had a near-death experience. And he told me that instead of going for the light, he told me, don't go for the light, that go for the darkness because it's a trick. And he went towards the darkness, and I guess he survived. But he was saying, don't go towards the light. Everybody says, go to the light, go to the light. And he said, that's the trick. They don't want you to go to the black. They want you to go to the light. And he said, it's actually the opposite. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Well, I've never heard that particular recommendation. In fact, the suicide book recounts stories that are so different. a near-death experience of a suicide is so different than a more natural or accidental death that what he is describing is very much like a suicide death. It is extremely dark, and they attempt to lure you into the darkness. And they tear at your body, they deceive you. But there's a really interesting, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We'll come back to this, but it's a very interesting process with the suicide part because there is really a luring in. That's the most consistent thing. But in talking about near-death experiences, some of the commonalities is yes, the light. It's a white, bright light that is so bright that you think it would blind you, but it doesn't hurt your eyes at all. And I think because it's probably not your physical eyes anymore, but that's a real common description. Everything is brighter and more vivid, with the exception of the suicides. Everything is dark. It's like you're walking in feces up to your shins. You have demons and creatures clawing at you. And I talked to my pastor recently about the definition of hell. And that's the book that I'm working on now, is near-death experiences of people who went to hell in their experience. Suicides go in that direction. It's very dark. And I asked him, I know he's not read this stuff. This is not his thing. I said, when I was a kid, I used to hear a lot about hell, that you're going to burn in hell. And don't do that. That's a sin. You'll burn in hell. And that it seemed around the 80s or 90s or so, you didn't hear so much about hell. And I asked him, was that kind of a marketing effort on behalf of the church to make it more attractive and less scary? He said, no, you can't get the church to agree on anything. I can understand the politics of that. He said, but in my study, and he's been studying for a long time, he says, hell is, imagine the worst regret you could possibly have. Let's say that you sped down the street